Hello, everybody. Welcome to this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. That's right, we did miss a week, so we're making up for it with some great in-studio guests here. I'm BJ Kubarulis alongside of John Marcario of the Connection newspapers, and on the far end, Dave Bushenfeld from the Fairfax County Times. And in the middle here, we've got Coach Bill Renner and his son, quarterback of the West Springfield Spartans, Bryn Renner. Before we get to that, we want to thank the folks that make this show possible. And of course, we're talking about one of our teammates, CCI Screen Printing, for all your screen printing needs at 703-978-0257. And we are on the web, an all-new website. Check out the website, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. You're going to get a chance to find more question and answer sessions with coaches and players, just like the ones we've got on set here today. And of course, I'm talking about Bill Renner and Bryn Renner. A great 1-2 punch, a Renner punch here from West Springfield, coming off a big win, Coach. You guys did defeat one of the Northern Region powers in Robinson this week, a 21-7 win over Robinson. That makes you guys 2-1 now. You went pound for pound with Stonebridge in week 1, and you also beat Edison as well. So those are 3 legit teams to start the season and a great schedule to get started. Coach, first off, how has the atmosphere been at school since you guys did knock off one of the traditional Northern Region powers in Robinson?
Well, it had been 12 years since we had beaten Robinson, so I think that the school is very excited about it. The kids, the faculty, we're all really excited that we had played a really good game and beat Robinson. So it's been very upbeat, very positive. Nice experience for our players.
And Bryn, obviously being a player, and you got to celebrate this on a couple of levels as well, as a player and as a celebration for your dad as well. You guys get to celebrate a couple of different things. We'll talk about your relationship as well, but a big win for your dad and a big win for the program. And for you, talk a little bit about what it's been like to be the quarterback of this team. You get to walk the halls and get the pats on the back.
Yeah, well, it's been great. We have great fans at school, and the student body's been really supportive of everything. And it was a really good win to beat Robinson 12 years, like my dad said. So it's a really good win. It's really good.
Now, Coach, you lost to Stonebridge the opening week, 56-36. Then you come back with 2 of arguably the best wins in the entire region, beat the defending Division V champion, Northern Region champion Edison, then a regional power in Robinson. What did you say to your team after the Stonebridge game to get them so focused, and especially your defense, which aside from a 42-point quarter against Stonebridge, has only given up 34 points in 11 quarters of football this year?
Well, John, we were really young last year on defense, and we had to go that way. And we felt like we invested in some really solid kids that would allow us to bring them along and learn the scheme we wanted to play. And they've proved to be true with that. We took kind of a beating after the West Potomac game, but I held fast that those were good kids. And that game was almost like an anomaly in what transpired. And they've just done a good job of continuing to learn and get better. And I think that's probably the fruit of their labors, those 2 games. And we're just really proud of them because they've continued to work.
And you mentioned that game, Coach. Let's rewind here for a minute for those at home that don't know what you're talking about. West Springfield and West Potomac played in the highest scoring game in the history of the Virginia High School League. Then quarterback Peter Lalick threw for about 35 touchdowns or something in that game. And Bryn, obviously, you played in that game. And when 2 teams combine for a shootout like that, I think something combined of something like 150 some points, and you come out on the losing end of it, Coach. You said you guys did take a beating from that game. Talk a little bit about that and how hard it is to bounce back from something like that, especially when you do have some young kids.
Well, there is an awful lot of good offensive skill players now, and this is my 19th year in this county. And just even watching high school football in general, it's not as easy to play good defense against some of the talent that's being put on the offensive side. I think a lot of people in the previous years would put their best players on defense, and while I still think that's true somewhat, you're seeing a lot more kids from 7-on-7 passing leagues and from the high profile of being an offensive player. You're seeing a lot more talent on offense, at least that's what I've observed. And so it's harder to stop those people, particularly when they're throwing and catching and spreading you out. And that was a game where we both run the same offense, and the guys on the offensive side were making great plays. That's what would happen in that game. And we scored 74 on them, they scored 81 on us, but I don't think that was the true story of what happened. Both teams just battled their hearts out. And we felt like that was going to be a pivotal game for both of us that year, and it was. And So.
And now both teams are ranked in our Fairfax Sports Network top 10. Stay tuned for that to see who is in the top 10 this week on the Fairfax Sports Network. But fast forward now to this year. Let's show the folks at home exactly what West Springfield has been able to do in your great start to this season. Obviously, you guys start off in a shootout there with the returning Division 5 big dog in Stonebridge, 56-36. And then you guys defeat Edison and Robinson in back-to-back weeks there, Dave. Two signature wins for a West Springfield team that did struggle, as you mentioned, Coach, last year, battled back, and here you guys are now as one of the top 10 ranked teams in the region.
Now, when you were preparing for the Robinson game, Bryn, it's no secret that you guys like to throw the ball around a lot. Robinson only had 3 guys coming back on defense that started last year. They're all on the defensive line. Did you feel like you guys could take advantage of the inexperience in the backfield there?
Well, I think as an offense, throwing the ball a lot is what, like you said, what we want to do. So I think we felt as offense just do our normal thing and just play out there and just run the offense like we know we're capable of.
Coach, what did you see kind of weakness-wise in their defensive backfield?
No, Robinson has a whole lot of weaknesses. Even though they had some inexperienced guys coming back, we thought they had done such a tremendous job stopping Stonebridge. Stonebridge had some success throwing the ball, but the kids were still making pretty good plays. As Brent said, we want to run what we want to run, and we want to run our scheme. And so I don't know that I saw any weaknesses other than the fact that as the game matriculates to see what we're being able to be successful with and kind of stick with it. But we have things we want to do as an offense, and we pretty much go out and try to do them.
Now, we mentioned the Peter Lalick. For those of you who didn't notice, last week he helped lead the University of Virginia to their win. He's getting some big minutes for them. But, Bryn, what kind of relationship do you still have with Peter? And do you talk with him often? How many pointers does he give you?
Well, we talk often, mostly online or text messages or through the phone. But he gives me a lot of pointers. Last year especially, knowing that I was going to be the quarterback next year. So we talked a lot and went over coverages, and he helped me a lot through that process.
Bryn, having been a wide receiver, started your first 2 years at wide receiver and was a great 1-2 punch with Peter over there. Now, as John mentioned, being at UVA, now you're the quarterback, and I guess you can read your receivers because you were one. You know what that's like. Let's show the folks at home who the top performers have been in the first couple of games this season. Let's jump into the Edison game. As you see, Bryn throwing for 3 touchdowns against Stonebridge, and Stallings, one of your top receivers as well. And then you've got a guy that can, in Brandon Bailey, that can also carry the ball very well. So looking at the numbers, though, thus far throughout the season, you guys have a lot of different weapons. Talk a little bit about your ability to kind of pick and choose. Obviously, with Dad being the coordinator and the coach there, you guys are throwing the ball. That's no secret. It's got to be a good feeling to know that you can pull the trigger at any time. But who are some of the guys that you're looking for out there?
Well, I think our whole team has all of our receivers, all of our skill players have the ability to take it to the house every time, score a touchdown on every play. So it's not really like pick and choose. It's more of any guy I get the ball to, I have confidence in they're going to do their job. Especially our offensive line, for Brandon, especially in the Edison game, they really stepped up and carried the load for us.
Coach, you guys do like to throw the ball, obviously looking at the numbers, but against Edison, you had a nice running game too. What is it like for you to know that people are going to be looking out for your passing game, but if you can get the running game going, that just opens up your passing game a lot more? And how important is establishing the run this year so you don't just become completely one-dimensional?
Well, our offensive line has done a tremendous job. We have 3 new starters there, and if you had to ask me to pick the key in those 2 wins, I would say that group of kids. For 3 new guys to come in, and 2 of them are seniors, and play their first year of varsity football with those 3 teams, we're just really proud of them. Adham Talat and Chris McDonald and Will Mallon at center and Osmar Alvarez at the other guard and Corey McCray, they've been really solid the last 2 weeks, and we think that's been probably the key to us. As you mentioned, John, we're noted for throwing, but we've been able to run the ball, and Brandon Bailey is a tremendous back. I think before it's all said and done, you're going to see he's one of the best ones in the region. And it's made it more difficult for people, and we're real happy about that. So those kids have done a great job.
You mentioned your defense a little bit. They've been able to force turnovers a lot. I believe you guys have had 10 forced turnovers against Edison and Robinson combined. I mean, what is it differently about those 2 games versus the first game and last year where you've been able to force so many turnovers that have helped your offense get in good scoring position?
Well, I think they understand how to play the kind of defense we want to play, which is we like to attack, and the game's starting to slow down for them. It's almost like, when you teach a quarterback, you need X number of reps before everything's starting to feel natural for them. And that's why we made a commitment last year after the West Potomac game to go with the kids we knew we felt like could bring on that process. But I think the game's slowing down. And usually when that happens, that's when you see turnovers. Because kids not only are going to go make the tackle, but they can find the ball. And we seem to be, knock on wood, doing a pretty good job of that now. We're real proud of them. So it's the game slowing down for them because of the repetitions in practice, the excellent job that our coaching staff has done preaching that, but also the game reps. It's starting to feel really good, comfortable for them to play defense. So.
If you're just joining us here on the Fairfax Sports Report, we're joined by West Springfield Spartans coach Bill Renner and his son, also the quarterback Bryn Renner, here on the Fairfax Sports Report, joining us to share their thoughts on the big win over Robinson and their 2-1 start to the season this year. Let's jump into the win over Robinson and get a little bit more specific. Bryn, 2 TDs in that game, and Andy Stallings has really been a good target for you. Talk a little bit about your rapport with your receivers. He's been kind of a go-to guy for you, kind of like you were for Peter last year.
Right. Well, Andy's started last year for Peter, and me and Andy have a really good relationship, as I do with all the receivers. So I kind of look to him as one of my friends. So we just have a good chemistry with each other. All
right, and offense is always fun, Dave, to talk about. But something really important to note here is that you guys held Robinson to 7 points. That's a win for your defensive program as well. That's really, I think, the most impressive thing you take away from this victory, Coach. Holding that team to 7 points, that's pretty important.
I would agree with you. I've been as impressed with them over the years that I've coached here offensively as anybody in the region. The diversity, the intensity, the way they play is just. So I was very proud of the kids. I agree with you. Our kicker had a lot to do with that. Tyler Bittencourt is really good, and in the second half in particular, he had 3 punts inside the 20 and in fact 2 inside the 10. And when you put them back that far, you take them out of their normal offensive plan, and Tyler did a tremendous job in the second half. We had stopped around midfield a couple times, not wanting to take some chances, and because we knew that he could do that, and our defense was playing well. So he's been a big part of that resurgence of our defense because of his ability to punt the football and kick off.
I got to throw this in there. I know, Dave, you want to jump in here for a second, but Tyler Bittencourt is 9 for 9 on field goals, 11 for 11 on extra points. And I think he's averaging 37 yards a punt. 14 punts at a clip of 530 yards altogether, and his longest was one of 50 yards, Coach. Mm-hmm. And you're a former kicker as well, who played at the collegiate level. It's got to make you happy, right?
He's a very talented young man. I've been doing the kicking business a long time, and I've told a few people that have called me this week, he's as talented doing all three as anybody I've seen in about 20 years. I've seen guys that kick off really well, and I've seen guys that punt really well, and I've seen a lot of good field goal kickers. But to produce what he's produced, last year he kicked off 66 times and had 53 touchbacks. The last 19 in a row, I've never witnessed that on tape or in person. So he's kind of an unsung hero for us, and he's starting to get a little notoriety, but we're real happy to have him.
That was actually going to be my question, was about Tyler.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll move on. I guess to start off talking about the relationship you have with Bryn. Is it difficult coaching your son? You like it? What are some of the pluses and minuses of having him as the quarterback for your team?
Well, Dave, I've always wanted to do that. I felt like, if I was blessed enough to continue to be a high school coach, I'd like to have the opportunity. I've talked with other guys about that and how they did that with their sons, and I just thought that would be a special thing. Bryn makes it easy. He's really pleasant to coach. He's a fine young man, and we have a good time together. So we've been on the sidelines since he was about 5 because went from ball boy. In fact, 2 years ago, we were laughing because we were watching one of our old films, and he was a freshman receiver, and Corey McCray, our offensive tackle, also started as a freshman, and we were watching last year's film with the opponent, and somebody else coach stopped the tape, and there they were, ball boys. And I said, oh my God, we're the only team that went from bringing the ball boys as 8th graders, and they're starting as freshmen. So I think the fact that he's been around the program and he's seen me coach a lot and knows what we want to do made that a real easy transition. So it's a pleasure.
How about for you? What's it like having your dad as your head coach?
Oh, I enjoy it. We talk a lot about football and 24/7 about football, and that's what I love because we watch film at night and do everything together. So I really enjoy that relationship.
Bryn, how important is it for this group to make the playoffs. I mean, you guys have missed it the last several years. And for people that aren't familiar, Spartan Nation is crazy about their sports team. I believe during the basketball championship, everybody from West Springfield was actually at that Northern Region semifinal game, filled it to the rafters. I mean, what does it mean to this group to be 2-1 and to be in good position to possibly make the playoffs?
Well, we're really excited about the 2-1 start and beating Edison and Robinson, like you said, but we really want to focus on the district now, and this is district play, and there's 7 games left, and that's all we're talking about. So we're kind of putting the past in the past, and it was good to win, but we're kind of focused on the forward of the district.
You can find more of this interview on the website, fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. I want to thank the West Springfield Spartans coach Bill Renner for coming in, and his son, the quarterback of the West Springfield Spartans, Bryn Renner. 2-1 for the West Springfield Spartans to start off the football season. The greatest show on turf is still in West Springfield. Come on back and join us for Monica Moore's volleyball report here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Thanks for coming in, guys.
Thank you, man. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great. Welcome back to the Fairfax Sports Report here on the Fairfax Sports Network. I'm your host, BJ Kubarulis, alongside of our volleyball reporter and analyst, Monica Moore. Monica, it's been a great couple of weeks for the start of the volleyball season, and of course, you've been there to interview the players and coaches throughout the season. And as always, here on the Fairfax Sports Report, you do have your Monica Moore FSN Analyst Volleyball Report. Walk us through what you got this week, Monica.
All right, thanks, BJ. Well, we are a couple weeks into the volleyball season, and at the top of my rankings is still Westfield. After losing a tough season opener to a non-region team, Loudoun County, they have rallied back and have defeated their last 4 opponents 3-0 in every single one of their matches. And Langley is still at the number 2 position with a record of 3-0, but they have a really big game tonight against Centerville, who's also 3-0, so it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top in that match. Langley has a lot of experience on that team. They have 7 seniors, and a couple of weeks ago I talked about 2 of them, Lisa Scott and also Megan Shiflett. Centerville doesn't have as much experience. They only have 2 seniors on that team, Jackie Moot, who's their libero, and Kelly Bruger, an outside hitter. But both of those players have been coming up big this season for Centerville so far. In fact, in their last game against Stonebridge, Moot had some great defense, and Bruger had 18 kills, which was a match high in that game. Now, next we have Chantilly, and they also have a perfect 3-0 record after they lost a scrimmage earlier against Loudoun County, which is that same team that Westfield lost to. And the newcomer to the list is Herndon, and they are actually 6-2 now after last night's win over Thomas Jefferson. And interestingly, in that match last night, they were behind during all 3 games and rallied back to win. They have a lot of experience as well with 7 seniors, and you can really see how well they play under pressure. They have a 90% serves on that team. They get 90% of them in, and that's really important with the rally scoring in high school volleyball. And speaking of Herndon, a couple of weeks ago, they hosted the 5th annual Herndon Invitational, which they have every year, and it featured 10 of our Northern Region teams in it. The Virginia High School Volleyball League asked them to make some last-minute changes, so they had to restructure it, and they divided it into 2 mini tournaments, the Herndon Invitational and the Hornet Invitational. And during the finals of the Herndon Invitational, Stonebridge defeated Herndon after Herndon had defeated Stonebridge a couple of matches earlier. And in the Hornet Invitational, Edison won. And so congratulations go out to Megan DiMartino from Stonebridge, who was the Herndon Invitational MVP, and to Crystal Douglas from Edison, who was the Hornet Invitational MVP. And you can check out our website. As BJ mentioned earlier, I have a transcript of an interview with the tournament director, Mark Jurgelowicz, as well as with Stonebridge's Natalie Driscoll, who made the all-tournament team for the Herndon Invitational. Now, I imagine next week we'll be talking a lot about that Langley-Centerville game, and so we'll have more about that soon. Thanks, BJ.
Hey, great job by Monica Moore. As always, here on the Fairfax Sports Report, tune in every week for the Fairfax Sports Network's Volleyball Top 5 rankings as delivered by Monica Moore. And as she said, check out the website for more volleyball analysis and action at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Now, for more football action, the boys are going to join me back on set, so don't go too far. Come on back for more on the Fairfax Sports Report. Welcome back to the Fairfax Sports Report here on the Fairfax Sports Network. We want to thank Coach Bill Renner and his son Bryn Renner, the quarterback over at West Springfield, for joining us here for football action on the Fairfax Sports Report. And Monica Moore, every week you can find her volleyball top 5 here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Guys, it's been a fantastic first couple of weeks to open this season for Northern Region football. And of course, when you talk about Northern Region football, you always start right up at the top where the big dogs rest. And of course, we're talking about the Concord District. Dave, who is leading this fantastic race in the Concord District?
Well, it's no surprise the top 2 teams, Westfield and Chantilly. There are currently 4 undefeated teams left in the Northern Region. 2 of them you see right there, 3-0 Westfield, 3-0 Chantilly. And in case you hadn't heard, it's a little game going on Thursday. Chantilly at Westfield might be kind of a big game, but we'll get to that later. Robinson suffered their first loss, as we were just talking about, to West Springfield. They're 2-1 now. Centerville won its second game in a row. They are now 2-1 as well. And the bottom 3 teams, Oakton, Herndon, and Fairfax, all sitting at 1-2.
And certainly the district has changed as Oakton, the former 2005 Northern Region and Virginia High School League AAA state champion, starts its season at 1-2. Westfield and Chantilly, Dave, match up this season in what looks to be the Northern Region game of the year. To kick it off early in the season, it's going to be Westfield and Chantilly, a rematch, guys, of last year's Division VI Northern Region final. Justin Creech, Fairfax Sports Network's football analyst, got a chance to catch up with both coaches. Of course, we're talking about Westfield's Tom Verbanek and Chantilly coach Mike Lally. Justin got a chance to write a preview for us, which you can find on our website, and Justin's going to be joining us here in just a minute. But guys, when you think about this matchup happening so early in the season, Dave, if Westfield or Chantilly, either one, obviously there has to be a winner and a loser. The winner obviously is going to get all the acclaim. What's that going to do to the loser, though, going in to what looks to be the matchup for the Division VI state region final by the end of the season?
They'll be disappointed, obviously, but I don't think it'll have that big of an effect. Whoever loses, it probably will be their only loss of the year until they meet again in the region final. Wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm giving the edge to Westfield, though. We'll talk about that a little later, just because they're playing at home, but they're 2 pretty evenly matched teams.
When it comes to the excitement of watching this game, it's huge. But when it all comes down to it, the game's not going to mean much because they're both going to be in the playoffs. They're both should likely get far in the playoffs, and these are both, you mentioned the Coach Verbanek and Coach Alley, great coaches, and they will not let their players sulk. The losing team will bounce back immediately. So a great game to watch, not going to mean much for the scheme of things.
All right, but what means a lot in the scheme of things here on set in the Fairfax Sports Report is having Justin Creech, FSN's football analyst, join us by phone. Justin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. What's going on, guys?
Hey, Justin, thanks for joining us. You got a chance to talk with both coaches, Coach Verbanek over at Westfield and Chantilly coach Mike Lally. Give us a little bit of insight, and this being a short week where games are played on Thursday, what was the mindset start with Coach Verbanek going into this game?
Coach Verbanek mainly is looking for the team to just come out and run their offense. He's a little concerned with the fact that the hype that's going into this game, everybody knows what happened between these 2 teams last year, especially in the playoffs. And with the game being at Westfield, everybody's focusing on this. He is concerned that his kids might get too caught up in that. As far as Coach Lally goes, he's actually pretty excited about this. He thinks it's a good early season, game. It'll be fun for the kids. And his main thing is he just wants his team to go out there and play good fundamental football. And he thinks if they can do that they can pull this thing out.
Justin, as we know, Austin Decker started the Northern Region final game for Chantilly. What did Coach Lally have to say about Austin and how he expects him to perform against Westfield?
He expects Austin to be excited, obviously just like the rest of the guys are. But he told me that I expect Austin to play the way he's played so far this season. Nothing different.
Now, you talked a lot about the hype. Neither team has really played what they would probably consider a tough opponent yet. They've had a lot of big wins, each recorded a shutout last week. Is either coach team worried about the lack of competition that the teams have had in the early going, and now they're going up against arguably the best teams in the region other than themselves?
No, I didn't sense that. I think that's one thing that these 2 coaches are looking forward to this game is they're really going to see how they stack up. You've got Chantilly with their strong running game, Torian Pace and Antonio Cross, and then Westfield, they've got Mike Glennon and Steven Sabat and Johnny Pickett. So I think both coaches are looking at this game as a way to figure out what they have.
The game does come tomorrow on a Thursday. Does that concern Coach Verbanek or Coach Lally that the game is a day before?
Now, neither coach seems too concerned about that. They're just excited to get the game going.
Well, Justin, we want to thank you for getting it going with us here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Great job and great preview on the big game, the biggest game in the Northern region this week. The Fairfax Sports Network will be there, and you can read more about Justin's interviews with both coaches at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Justin, thanks for joining us here on the Fairfax Sports Report.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, guys. So Justin mentioned a couple of names in his interview. Obviously Stephen Tabbitt is a great running back, has rushed for 6 touchdowns so far this season, I believe. And Mike Glennon is obviously the big name at Westfield. Obviously, his brother having won a state title a couple of years back, and now at Virginia Tech, and Glennon going to NC State. So you see those weapons being the big weapons for Westfield. And Chantilly, of course, with Torian Pace and Antonio Cross, the 1-2 punch. Boy, that's a really good matchup. You kind of have to pick and choose. Look, are you going to go with the arm in Glennon, or are you going to go with the strong running game? Paul, you got a chance to cover this team as it ran all the way to the state final last year in Mike Lally's squad. What have you seen from them this year that you think may be able to give them an edge over Westfield?
I've seen a stronger running game, and even strong, which is surprising how good they were last year. But I saw a stronger running game with both the running backs. And one thing that I think is going to be a key for this game is Brian Kennedy. A name you didn't mention yet, the number 2 running back for Westfield and their linebacker safety combo. He is a playmaker on defense. Last year's Northern Region defensive player of the year. So if he can move up there and help stop that running game, we'll see.
I think the X factor in this game, and it's kind of an obvious X factor, but it's kind of not, is going to be Mr. Decker, because everybody knows that Chantilly can run the football. I mean, they have 11 rushing touchdowns this year with their 2 backs, but they beat Westfield last year, and Decker was able to pass the ball a little bit. Coach Verbanek said Chantilly hasn't done much of the passing this year, but he expects them to air it out a little bit because what Decker did to them last year. If Decker's able to throw the ball and they can get the running game going, they should be competitive. But if he's got under 50 yards passing, it could be a blowout for Westfield.
Dave, you mentioned it earlier, Westfield's at home, and that's the reason that you give them the advantage. And in just a minute, you're going to get a chance to see who we picked here on the Fairfax Sports Network. Our picks is us experts, or what we like to call ourselves, think who's going to win the game this week. But Dave, home field advantage for Westfield in that big stadium is certainly a key advantage for the Bulldogs.
Well, you would think so, but then you look at last year, the teams played twice. Westfield won at Chantilly, Chantilly won at Westfield, so who knows, maybe it won't be that big of a deal. But when they're so evenly matched, I think that might tip it in Westfield's favor. I think it's really going to come down to who can take away the other one's strength. Obviously, Chantilly has the running game, Westfield has the passing game. I watched Westfield when they played Lee. They won that game 38-7, but there were times that they struggled a little bit stopping the running game. And all respect to Lee, their running game isn't as strong as Chantilly's. So it'll be really interesting to see how the Westfield run defense stacks up against Cross and Pace, and how the Chantilly defensive backs can slow down Mike Glennon and those high-flying wide receivers.
I did crunch some numbers that you can see on the website at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. A few things. The Chargers have scored 160 points while only allowing 20. Almost identical stats for Westfield. 124 points, allowing 13. Most importantly is Chantilly's game against Annandale this last week. It was huge for Chantilly. It shows the mindset that they have.
Yeah, they're going in and they're taking care of business. And last year, you've seen this team grow up from last year when it went to the state tournament. Last year, they'd come out and you could see that they knew they were good, but they didn't have that step on their throat mentality. And it looks like this year they have it. And we'll see if they'll be able to do that against a traditionally strong Westfield team coached by Tom Verbanek, which hasn't lost very many games to Chantilly once. They've dropped 1 game since they opened that school a couple of years back. Let's move on to a team that hasn't lost a lot of games in past years, did go and win a state final in 2005, but now suddenly you turn around and you wonder, what happened to the Oakton Cougars? And guys, this is a team that went to the state championship, won it against a Heisman candidate now. Percy Harvin could be in the running for a Heisman at Florida, and they shut that team down in Lansdowne 2 years ago. I was there to cover that game, and now they've started off with one of their worst starts in the history of that school. And really, I got a chance to talk with some people over at Oakton, and what it's about, it's young kids, and they don't have the line that they used to have, Dave, 2 years ago.
Well, you hit the nail on the head with the inexperience that they have. Me and Paul were both at the game against Madison. They hadn't lost to Madison in quite a few years. They really were shooting themselves in the foot, a lot of turnovers, a lot of penalties, things like that. And until those guys get some experience under their belt, they're probably going to struggle. You know, they got the first win against TC Williams on Friday. Maybe that'll get them heading in the right direction, but we'll have to wait and see.
With teams like Oakton, with teams like Robinson, with teams like Lake Braddock, with teams like Westfield, you take for granted that when you lose a lot of strong players to graduation, it takes some time. It doesn't usually take time for Oakton, the Robinsons. They always rebuild, but when a team doesn't rebuild as quickly, you can see what happens. You take it for granted at Oakton, but you see here, they got young kids. They need to get that experience fast.
Well, one school that's had some young kids since it's opened its doors 3 years ago was South County. And they're a team that almost went to the playoffs last year in a 6-4 finish. Just missed it in a couple of scenarios where they could have backed in last year, but missed the playoffs. And everyone thought this was going to be the year that they would come in and make some noise. South County now struggling a little bit. John and I were both at the game. Let's jump into the Patriot District standings, John Marcario, and you show us who lies where in the Patriot District.
West Potomac currently is 3-0. None of these teams have played a district game on a side note. Then you see West Springfield, the Renters were just in studio. They are 2-1. Annandale 2-1, coming off that surprising 49-0 loss to Chantilly. Then you have Lake Braddock, who plays a big game against South County this week. They're 2-1. Then TC Williams, Hayfield, and South County all share identical 1-2 records. And Lee, with that tough early season schedule, sits at 0-3. They are very thankful non-district play is over.
And that's who lies where in the early goings in the Patriot District. John, you mentioned that no one has played an in-district game, and that's really when you're going to start to see the cream rise to the top. And, you know, West Springfield, yes, they've gotten these big wins out of district, but really what counts, guys, is in district and how the playoffs has changed this year. The PowerPoints that they get from the Robinson win and the Edison win certainly does help, but in years past they would have needed those. They don't need those. Now they need to win a district championship. As you mentioned, John, talking with Bryn, how important it is for West Springfield to do that. South County, on the other hand, and Edison, the little inter-district rivalry there as Edison came in from the National District. And the Patriot District South County team, they struggled this year in our Fairfax Sports Network Game of the Week. Greg Wyszynski and Wynn Ellington were on the call, and we've got a couple of highlights from that game. John Marcario and myself will run you through them as we were there to see all the action. And for South County, the early goings, Ryan Hayrana ran a little sneak play action fake right up the gut. Everybody from Edison bit on it, and unfortunately for the Stallions, that would be the only play that they would score on. Here's Akeem Perry, John, finding the outside gap off tackle and a great stiff arm, and Akeem Perry finished with 220 yards rushing, a career high for him, and also 1 touchdown. Ben Barber throws a touchdown pass there to Drew Baldwin, a little fade route to the back of the end zone, a gorgeous pass for the quarterback. He completed 4 of 11 passes. Ben Barber, the former wide receiver, John.
You're going to see a fumble there from Titus Pennington. South County struggled holding on to the football. They had 4 fumbles for the game, 2 total. Here you're going to see a punt, and then this is just more evidence of South County struggling to hold on to the ball. This is a good play on their part. Nice little 25, 30-yard run back on the punt. They struggled moving the ball in the second half, couldn't get an offense going. Their running game struggled to get chunks of yards at a time. They couldn't throw the ball very well. Here you're going to see Ben Barber just running, scrambling. He tried to get some receivers open, was a little off on some. That was his lone pick of the game. As you said, 4 of 11. He only had 30 yards passing, so he struggled a little bit. They didn't need him this game, though. Here you're going to see Akeem Perry run it for about 30.
And Akeem Perry, you know, and Kevin Carter also. Akeem Perry there catching the pitch in the backfield. This was typical of what Edison was able to do. Perry here finds almost the end zone. Is he going to make it? Is he going to make it? The ankle-saving tackle there and saves the touchdown, but Perry would find the end zone. And also, here you see Kevin Carter, a young man that found the end zone twice. He said, my role's been reduced this year, and I love blocking for Perry, but guys, that doesn't look like blocking there. It looks like his role was just fine. 114 yards for Kevin Carter. Again, Perry, this 1-2 punch was just gorgeous all night, and Perry's going to make a couple of cutback moves and find the end zone. John, the route was on after halftime. It was a 7-7 ball game, but after halftime, South County couldn't hold on to the football. 4 turnovers on the day for South County and an interception, so rather 5 turnovers, 4 of those fumbles.
Right. Yeah, BJ and I, we were at the same game. If you listen to us talk about the game, though, we'll have differing opinions. Here's another touchdown by Carter. Carter was the team's leading rusher last year. On a side note, he led the team with 13 rushing touchdowns, so he's no slouch right there. If you see in these clips, by the way, there's a pouring down rain for most of the game. It seemed to affect the South County players. This was a big run back by South County in the second half. It got their players kind of moving, but on 3 plays, they could not move the ball more than 10 yards and ended up turning it back over on downs. But in terms of the game, I mean, BJ, he'll give you his opinion, but my opinion is South County looked like a team that was going to struggle to compete not only in the Patriot District this year, but for a playoff spot. They suffered a couple of key injuries in that game on the defensive end. They struggled moving the ball. They had inconsistent quarterback play. They couldn't hold on to the football. They couldn't make lines.
Yeah.
They couldn't make any holes. They play more than likely their game of the season tonight against Lake
And
Red.
Kevin Carter finds the end zone again. 4 different Eagles. This young man here finds the end zone as well. 4 different Eagles rushed for at least 40 yards. 2 of those guys went over 100 yards, and one of them over 200 yards. And there's another Eagle scoring late in the game as the route was on, John. And you mentioned your analysis there during the highlights. I mean, this is a team in South County that struggled. I think the Akeem Perry run, as you saw him, Dave, you were laughing there during the replays as he was running up the sideline and no one could bring him down. That's some tough yardage for an Edison team that was all about throwing last year with Sean Lloyd and the Ben Barber connection.
I am just shocked with how things have been going for South County. Now, they've faced difficult teams. This is a team last year that shut out Annandale at Annandale, who had Nathan Cartagena, who was one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league last year, could run all over the field. They shut them out at home, and yet they're giving up, 38 points last week. They gave up 46, I think, to Westfield. I mean, they had most of their defenders coming back. What's happened to this defense this year?
One telling tale about that defense is they've been playing football there 3 years for South County now. They had not lost by more points in their losses to Westfield and their losses to Edison in their entire history of their program. Those are their 2 biggest losses, and this is year 3.
And before we close out here on the South County Stallions and a big win for Edison, I got to say, those of you who think South County is clear and done out of it, think again. Look at their opponents. Westfield, a team that could win the state title and beat the Redskins, and Edison, a team that has not been in the Northern Region Final for Division 5 in 6 out of the last 7 years. So, these are 2 opponents, and South County did what they were supposed to do against Stewart. They blew them out by more than 40 points. Falls Church, rather. I get those 2 confused all the time. So don't stick a fork in South County just yet. Dave, I know you want to jump in. 10 seconds.
I'm not saying that they're done by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just saying they did play well against the good teams last year, shutting out Annandale. But for some reason this year it's just not going their way.
All right, and for a team that it is going their way, Paul Frummelt, the West Potomac Wolverines, and big man on the line, Jimmy Bennett, Cole Walter, the quarterback, and of course, Josh Wells, the name everybody knows from West Potomac that seems to rush for 100 yards in his sleep every week. Let's show the folks at home what West Potomac's been able to do by the numbers.
Well, you see West Potomac points per game, 33.6. That's a stallion. And points allowed, 14.6. You see the difference there, 101 points overall. 44 points allowed overall. So they're just doing things big out in West Potomac.
And of course, Cole Walter, the quarterback there, 640 yards, guys. It's been 3 games, so over 200 a game, 10 TDs, guys. So do the math there, about 3.3333 a game. He throws .33 touchdowns, and only 3 picks, so his accuracy is pretty good. Josh Wells is the man, though. 44 carries, 352 yards, 3 TDs. And Cole Walter's favorite target is Robert Bird, Dave. These are a couple of guys here that are obviously the big names for the West Potomac Wolverines.
And the thing that makes it even more impressive what Walter's been able to do throwing it is the fact that they're handing it off to Wells so many times. To have 352 yards from him on the ground and then 640 through the air, it's very difficult to slow these guys down on offense.
And it was difficult to slow down Akeem Perry versus South County this week. Perry, John, went for over 200 yards, and that makes Akeem Perry our Athlete of the Week here on the Fairfax Sports Report. You can also find Perry on our website as our Fairfax Sports Network Athlete of the Week. Tell us a little bit about Akeem and what he was able to do.
Akeem Perry against South County, a career-high 220 yards rushing. He averaged a stunning 9.7 yards per carry in that game. He's used to that, though. Last year, he only had 40 carries and limited action, but he did average 5 yards per carry. The senior, and as Kevin Carter calls him, the little guy, could play a bigger role for the Edison this year. But again, 220 against South County, 1 touchdown, 9.7 yards per carry.
All right, and Akeem Perry, you are our Fairfax Sports Network Athlete of the Week. You can find that on the web at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Jumping right into the Liberty District, Paul Frummel, the Liberty District. Last year, it was the Patriot District that made everyone say, hey, well, there's something to be seen in this Patriot District. Well, now with Madison and Marshall getting better, Langley upsetting a Concord District team this year, the Liberty District is where all the fun is this year.
And folks, the Madison Warhawks are for real. 3-0 so far. Stonebridge, obviously last year's Liberty District champ at 2-1 and 1-0 in the district. You see Langley there, 1-0 in the district, 2-1 overall. Woodson 2-1, Marshall 2-1. So you got some good numbers there from the Liberty District teams. South Lakes at 1-2, McLean at 1-2, and Thomas Jefferson struggling at 0-3 on the year.
All right, and those are your Liberty District standings after the third week of games. You can also find the standings, results, and more on the website, fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. What you can also find on the web is Win Ellington, Fairfax Sports Network football analyst's interview with Langley lineman Will Wilson. Win got a chance to catch up with Will Wilson, a guy that Paul Frummel is quite fond of, Paul being a former lineman, and the linemen don't often get love. In just a minute, Win Ellington's going to join us to walk us through his interview with Will. But, Paul, you got a chance to do a little bit of coverage on Will for the Saxons this year. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, he's right in that Marshall Moore mold. 3 M's there. He's definitely one of those key linemen for the Langley Saxons, and Wynn's going to tell you about it here right now.
That's right. We've got Win Ellington, who did catch up with Will Wilson in that Marshall Moore mold. You did mention that Marshall Moore was a beast lineman last year, and if you read Wynn's question and answer session, which is on fairfaxsportsnetwork.com, you will hear Will talk all about Marshall. Well, Win, you got a chance to catch up with Will Wilson after Langley's coming off its first win over a Concord District team in more than 5 years. Talk a little bit about what Will Wilson and the Langley Saxons, what kind of cloud nine they're on right now in the halls over in McLean.
Hey, fellas, I got a chance to watch the Saxons practice yesterday and then catch up with Will afterwards. And he just commented to me that it was a really big win for the Saxons, that in years past, in games like that many times when they had the lead, they would give it up and they wouldn't be able to pull the victory out at the end. But against Herndon, they had a two-touchdown lead at the halftime. It was 21-7. Herndon came back and tied it 21-21. Langley went back ahead 28-21, and then after that, the defense just held the Hornets off, and it was just a different situation, and they responded differently than when they've been in those kind of circumstances in years past.
And you mentioned years past when Langley, since 1999, has posted a 6-11 record against Concord District teams, and the only ones that they beat were teams that aren't even in the Concord District anymore. They beat South Lakes and Jefferson 3 times each, and they were also outscored 428-187 since '99 by Concord District teams. So for Langley, this is a major step forward. For Herndon, a major step back in one of their rebuilding years. But don't tell that to Will Wilson and the Langley Saxons.
No. Will Wilson, he seems very confident in the team's potential this year. He definitely feels that they are a playoff team. I asked him which game he was looking the most forward to, and he mentioned the McLean game at the end of the year because it was an inter-city rivalry. But then he went on to say, he believes that they'll reach the playoffs this year, so that's even, bigger than their rivalry against McLean.
When one thing that Will is known for is he's the offensive lineman, but this year, switching over doing some defense as well and doing a great job at it. Did you talk to him at all about how he likes playing on the defensive line?
No, we really didn't get a chance to talk about how he likes it on the defensive line.
Okay.
But he did elaborate on his blocking a good bit. That's really what I focused on in the interview because I knew that's what the colleges were looking at him to do, and not as much on the defensive end what he also plays. But he did mention that they blocked very well against Herndon, that the offensive line was able to effectively open up the holes, and he got a few pancakes in the game, which he was pretty proud about.
One thing that Will told me is he's not going to make up his mind about college. He's going to wait until the season's over. Is that what he told you?
He didn't give me a timeline, but he did say the 3 schools that he was mainly interested right now were Army and Navy and Old Dominion. His dad went to Army, so that obviously has an influence on him. But also, what I thought was intriguing were his comments about Old Dominion. I didn't know that Old Dominion was starting a football program. I was a little out of the loop on that. But according to Will, that 2009 is going to be their first season. So the idea of being on the ground floor of a new program is intriguing to him. He's seen what some of these smaller schools in Florida have done, like Central Florida, who gave Texas a very good game this past weekend, and then he didn't. Look at South Florida too, beating Auburn a week ago. So being part of a new program and an up and coming program, he was intrigued about that. But of course, he hasn't made he didn't make a commitment when I spoke to him or anything. But that was something that he was attracted to.
All right, Wynn, we are intrigued by your knowledge. Thanks for joining us here on the Fairfax Sports Report. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to catch all of Wynn's interview, go to the website and get a chance to read Wynn's interview with Langley lineman Will Wilson. That's a big boy and the big man on campus now for the Langley Saxons, who are coming off a big win over Herndon. Thanks for joining us, Wynn.
Hey.
All right, guys. So you jump right into into the National District, out of the Liberty District, where Madison, of course, and Stonebridge, and all the big names are again making a name for themselves. But let's jump into the National District, where it's always Edison's world. Dave, John.
Edison sitting there at 2-1 overall. They have that one loss to West Springfield. Then you have Falls Church there, 2-1 as well. Then you have Mount Vernon, Yorktown at 1-2. Then Wakefield, Washington, and Lee, who lost to Paul's alma mater, Fairfax, this past week, and Stewart, all at 0-3. I want to talk a little bit about Edison just for 1 quick minute. Ben Barber, he's been a hot topic with us and I found in my Marcario brain the best possible way to utilize Ben Barber. Watching him play quarterback, it seems, just between these 2 eyes, that he's just a second off with throwing it to the wide receivers, and it takes that split second to hit the receiver. If you want to utilize him well and get him the ball a lot, you could stick him at wide receiver, have Suggs at quarterback, also run the triple running back in the backfield. That way, if you want to turn around, pitch in the ball, you can do that as running. If you want to throw it to him, you can do that as well. At quarterback, he runs it half the time anyway.
Sure.
Try that.
Okay, well, you can tell that to Vaughn Lewis, who has been a coach in this region for 35 years and has been to the state finals maybe every year in Division 5 about how to use his quarterback. What we'll do right now, though, is we'll jump into the top 10 rankings for the Fairfax Sports Network, and that's something that you can find every week here on the Fairfax Sports Network and also online at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. No surprise, it's the number 1 and number 2 teams of the Fairfax Sports Network's top 10. They're going to be squaring off this week. Westfield, unanimous every week here on the Fairfax Sports Network. And until they lose, I suspect they will continue to be that number 1. Chantilly knocking on the door, up from number 3 to number 2. And West Potomac, John Marcario, that's a team that is also on the rise from number 4.
Jimmy Bennett's Wolverine sits there at 3, representing the Patriot District well. Then you have West Springfield, big jump from no ranking to 4th. They could continue to rise this week as they play Hayfield on Thursday night. That should be a win for them.
You got Stonebridge and then Robinson, 2 teams that already have an early season loss, something you don't see from both programs.
We've been talking a lot about Edison. They're sitting at number 7. They dropped a bit from number 5 last week. Madison dropped from number 7 to number 8. And Annandale, after that tough loss to Chantilly, drops from 8 to 9.
3 teams that were not ranked prior to this season, or rather prior to this week, are now in the rankings. Centerville turns it around and wins their final 2 games after losing early in the going. So here they are now ranked tied for 10th with the Bruins at Lake Braddock, and I suspect that the defensive presence at Lake Braddock will help that team climb in the rankings as well in a fun Patriot District. West Springfield, guys, all the way up to number 4 without even being ranked. They gave Stonebridge a run in week 1. They beat number 6 Robinson, and they also beat number 7 Edison. So gaining respect are the West Springfield Spartans, and I have to say, in the years that I've been doing this, That is the first time I've seen West Springfield in our top 10 football poll. And we want to thank, of course, Coach Bill Renner and his son, quarterback Bryn Renner, for joining us here on the Fairfax Sports Report tonight. All right, guys, let's jump right into our Week 2 Pick'em results, where every week here on the Fairfax Sports Report, we pick who we think are going to win the big games of the week.
You shouldn't listen.
And you shouldn't listen to us at all, because obviously none of us know what the heck we're talking about, because as
excuse me.
you'll see,
One man does.
I know what I'm talking about.
as you'll see from our records there, guys, I am at a measly 2-4, and right next to me, making me look terrible, is Fairfax County sports editor Dave Buchenfeld with a 4-2 record. He's correctly picked Robinson and Lake Braddock. Remember, these are games from Week 2. Because we missed an episode, obviously, last week. So these are the Week 2 picks that we made. John Marcario, no surprise, goes 0-3 in Week 2 and is at 1-5 on the season. That one win was certainly not South County upsetting Westfield. Paul Frummelt at 2-4, Lake Braddock and Annandale. And I really can't talk, guys, because one pick right for me this week was Lake Braddock barely beating Woodson. Great little rivalry there as well. Let's jump into the next week of picks and see who's picked what in Week 4 of Pick'em. All right, guys. No one's going to gain any ground this week except for all of us on Paul Frummelt when South County loses to Lake Braddock.
Hey, it was 7-7 at the half, guys. Come on.
yeah.
South County's a good team. I like their chances against Lake Braddock.
If you want to just give me the trophy right now, I'd be happy to take it.
I think you heard of Spygate with New England. I think we have Emailgate right here with Dave. He just hacked into everybody's email account. Said, I'm going to pick all your games. That way I can't lose any ground.
Every week, Dave and John and Paul send me their picks, so all I'm going to do from now on is just copy Dave's picks because he is at a sparkling 4-2 record on the season. Go to the website to see who leads the rankings in our Pick'em every week here on the Fairfax Sports Report. And, of course, every week here on the Fairfax Sports Report, we break away from our Fairfax sports love and we jump into that beautiful western county we call Loudoun, where our Paul Frummelt has really gotten his toes wet, if you will, in the Loudoun County part of town. Paul, you love your Loudoun, and Loudoun loves you because you do the Loudoun Report.
All right, guys, I'm going to make this extremely quick because we are running out of time, but I am going to give the Dulles District top 3 in football, and right at number 1 is Broad Run. Now, Broad Run, again, they were idle this week, but they had a huge win against Ballou last week, and a huge win, and that puts them at the top of my list. Now, Parkview, again, last year's Dulles District champs, they are at number 2. They haven't lost yet either, so don't count out Parkview by any stretch of the imagination. And number 3, a big surprise coming into this season, Briar Woods. We knew they were going to be good in their first year in the Dulles District, but not this good. Right now, they are 3-0, and they will make a run in the Dulles District. Now, there's a lot more Loudoun Report you can check out online, but I have to go right now. So the Dulles District top 3.
All right, and, obviously you mentioned Ballou beating the DCIA, returning champion in Ballou. And really, guys, Broad Run beating Ballou was something a couple of years ago we would probably never been talking about.
Coaches in their second year. Let's see what Mike Lally did last year. Mike Burnett in his second year, see what he's doing.
Big man Burnett is the big man in Loudoun right now. And the big man on our set is John Marcario when he talks about his madness every week here on the Fairfax Sports Report. John Marcario talks about what's grinding his gears for the week. And apparently this week it's the band. John, take it away.
Do high school bands have a clue? Because I don't think they do.
Ooh.
I've been to 3 games thus far. 1, 2, 3. And in all 3 of them, the band. Yes, the band has been playing before snaps, during plays, and after plays. Are you kidding me? There's no level of sports in football between college and the pros where there's music playing during the play or during the snap. That's rude and inconsiderate. Be considerate for the athletes playing the game. Finally, follow the game itself. There's no need, and I mean no need, to play We Will Rock You if your team's down by 35 points with a minute to go in the game. I understand if you're trying to pump the crowd up. That's fine. Play a different song. The only time the band has to sound good doesn't have to be during their 20-minute halftime performance.
They should play more Benny Hill music as Westfield runs down the field.
I'd just like to say, as a former clarinet player, that I got your back, man. I love you guys.
Yeah, John, way to knock the band down a few pegs.
Pork, really show that band. All right, guys. Every week on the Fairfax Sports Report, tune in to hear what's grinding John's gears on Marcario's madness. You can also find it on the website at www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. It's an all-new look on the Fairfax Sports Network, and beautiful pictures of myself, John Marcario, Paul Frummelt, and the wonderful Dave Bushenfeld, Monica Moore, and all your FSN personalities. Thanks to CCI Screen Printing. They give us all our screen printing needs, and they can give you yours as well at 703-978-0257. One of our stellar teammates is CCI Screen Printing. The game of the week, guys, this week, the big one, obviously, is Chantilly and Westfield. The Fairfax Sports Network will be at that game. Go to the website for more details at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. All right, guys. Westfield?
Yeah.
Westfield?
Big.
Westfield?
It's going to be close.
It will not be big. It will be close. It will be Westfield. Tune in next week on the Fairfax Sports Report. Every week, we're bringing you action from the northern region.